Hey, what's up? It's your boy BobbySapphire. Today I'm going to go over my Boba Cunning deck that I won the Connecticut 1K with. This video was originally made for Patreon subscribers. What's up, subscribers? And 2 weeks after that, we're releasing it public on the YouTube channel. So if you're a subscriber, what's up? If you're not a subscriber, what's up? You could have had this 2 weeks ago. But we're going to go over the deck and all things Cunning Boba, I guess. All right, very briefly, here's the overview of the list. You might have seen me go over this on the Connecticut tournament report or in our Discord channels. The only thing to really say about the deck on this slide is that I did try the Jeddah City, and I like it against a lot of decks. I think that you can really utilize things like Syndicate Lackey and Bosk with Administrator Tower and be really happy. I'm sorry, with Jeddah City and be really happy. But I was just losing to Sabine all the time, and when I made the switch to 30 points, I started beating Sabine with far more frequency. Also, I'll talk a little bit about the sideboard later, but my sideboard was constructed knowing that my Swiss rounds would be open deck lists. So I wanted the full gamut of 3 confiscates in the list so that I would not necessarily have to board in all 3, but that I could show my opponent that I had 3. If they had traitoresses, I generally brought in 2. If they had confiscates, I generally brought in all 3. If they had some, if it was a chariot list or something, I might have brought in a confiscate or 2, but for the most part, I was looking to blow people out who did things like spend 5 resources on a traitoress or who had entrenched my Boba Fett. The Jabbas came in pretty much every matchup. I just cut things that I didn't think were good in the matchup. We can talk about that a little bit later. The Change of Hearts didn't come in much, and the Syndicate Lackeys got replaced for the other 5 drops at times. All right, so I'm going to continue to say this, but you really have to think about what cards are good in specific matchups. You have to learn this stuff. I can't just tell you this stuff and expect you to have it when you're at the table. If your opponent has a deck that's probably playing Sabine unit on 2, you shouldn't opt into playing Greedo or Crafty Smuggler when those cards get completely blown out. If you're on the play, that's a little bit different. Your opponent could blow their ECL early on one of these units, which I think is a pretty fair trade. Even if they don't use the ECL, you can happily trade into them if you want. Often with a Crafty, it makes sense to hit their Sabine for 2, and then they decide whether or not they want to kill your Crafty. Cartel Spacer, not usually what I want to play on 2, but against a red aggro deck that doesn't have ECL, it's usually fine because we have Shoot First to kill things like A-Wings and Red 3s and stuff. But in general, I like to think of Cartel Spacer as a late game trick, like a turn 4, turn 5 trick that sets up a Boba Fett kill. But if you have an otherwise pretty busted hand and you don't want to ship it because you have a Cartel Spacer or even maybe a subpar 1 drop, it's okay. You can just go with it. But in general, know which matchups each are good in. You want Viper Probe Droid versus things like aggro. You want Crafty Smuggler in the mirror. Greedo can also be good versus certain aggro decks, and also really good against control that don't ping. It's possible you could play a Greedo against a Vader or Palpatine, but ideally you're resourcing it or you are holding one in your hand so that you can kind of push the board with them. I can talk about that on our next slide with 3 drops. Okay, just like on the last, when we're thinking about our 2 drops, we're trying to curve out here, right? So 2 drop, 3 drop. Try and think about which ones are good versus which 3 drops are good versus which decks. Boba Fett, really, really good. Boba Fett's never bad, but he is really, really good in aggro because he'll often just feed off of the units your opponent plays. Bodhi, huge against control. Oftentimes with the blue Vader decks, the Palp decks, you really want to be stripping their hand. This can even be great into other Boba decks or even sometimes aggro decks. Usually not right on the 3 resource turn, but Bodhi still has a place. 7th Fleet Defender, really, really good in the mirror. If you are going wide with 7 Fleet Defenders, they're not going to be able to do things like Overwhelming Barrage. You're bored. I'm thinking about the Green Mirror. When I say mirror, I'm definitely going to be thinking about Green Boba. I know Blue Boba and Yellow Boba are becoming more popular, but I don't expect to see them as much, at least at this point. So Swoop Racer, I generally won't drop unless I'm really trying to push the board or I have nothing else. A lot of things kill Swoop Racer, but if you're able to use Shoot First or shoot first on your 2-drop play, get the resource back, play a 3-drop. Swoop Racer is really, really great there because generally you can do so with initiative or into a board that can't kill the Swoop Racer back. So that's really good. The comment there about not needing initiative early is when if your opponent's trying to aggro you or they're trying to get quicker actions to claim initiative, you can get a little greedy, play your Bodhi, see what they've got, kill something, with your 2-drop, and then play a Greedo, for example, if it's turn 2. But don't be afraid to do things like play a 2-drop, or play a 3-drop on the 4 resource turn, kill something, untap 1, play a 2-drop. We really are going to try and play 2 turns of the game where we're playing more than one card. That's what's going to allow us to go wide and push our advantage. So try and look at your hand. A lot of times this is dictated by your hand, right? There's no card draw really other than Jabba if we're putting him in the main deck. So we want to see what our tempo plays can be and what are the turns that we can play 2 cards. Obviously on the Boba flip turn we want to do that. If we can manage to do that at least one more time before the start of before the Boba flip turn, we could be playing 2 cards a turn for 3 turns in a row, and even though that'll use all of our cards, our deck is so good that we have enough top decks that will allow us to continue to push that advantage. Okay, on the 4 resource turn, we could be doing things like pushing our board, pushing our advantage. But the 4 resource turn, if we already have 3 units out, is when I like to start using the events and changing the tempo and really attacking to their face. So doing things like saving or holding a waylay for this turn. If your opponent taps out, doing things like playing Cunning and Surprise Strike. Our opponent using all their resources means they're not going to be able to react to our attacks if we do the +4/+0 with Cunning, which is obviously a really, really strong play. One of the strongest plays we have, probably the best play the deck has. So if we're playing against a villain blue deck and they haven't used any of their resources yet, we shouldn't be doing things like giving our units +4/+0. We want to find other ways to attack, other ways to do damage, and other ways to progress our board. But as soon as my opponents get their shields down, and I mean by spending all their resources, knowing that they can't interact with us, that's when I start attacking face. You can do this, you can set this up with things like Waylay and Shoot First by putting pressure on their board, killing their things or removing their things, opening up the lanes for their attacks. They play something in response. That's when we can do we've untapped 1 and now we have 2 resources up for a Surprise Strike. I like, it's nice to save the Surprise Strike for the killing stroke. That's can be a really, really good tactic. It kills your opponents from nowhere. But since we have to attack with the unit when we pump, we can't double pump to win with Surprise Strikes and Shoot Firsts. So it's often good that if you have the resources available and you're not going to use them otherwise, burning that Surprise Strike in hopes that you draw another one can still be a really good play. It could be on the 4 resource turn that we're still just playing a 3-drop and a 2-drop or slamming Gamorrean guards, and ideally a Greedo or a Shoot First. But if we have a good board on turn 4, on the 4 resource turn, and we have these pumps in hand, this is when we start playing them. I definitely prefer to save Cunning for the 5 resource turn because we're taking a bunch of actions. But look at your hand. Do you have 2 Cunnings already? Do you have 2 Cunnings and a Gamma Guard? Because then you might want a Cunning on the 4 resource turn, play the Gamos on 5, untap with a bunch with Boba, and play the Cunning again. So this is where the 4 resource turn is where I start to think about these things. Once my board is developed, I'm happy to start using my events to go face. It's also really important when thinking about things like the bounce effects of Waylay and Cunning that we want to do this when our opponent has spent their resources. So again, playing the chess match of trying to do things that get them to spend their resources. Don't just do this blindly. If you bounce a Child Sin and they haven't done anything that turn and can just replay them, you've just wasted a card for the most part because you still, sometimes you don't care if they replay things like a K2SO, sure, replay it. It's not attacking this turn anyway. But when it's a Sentinel, you really need to get them to spend resources somehow to make these plays backbreaking. Another thing to consider is I try not to, I guess this is the first time I want to mention cards that are not good in the matchups. If you're not playing against Sentinels like that, Shoot First is a card that that can come out even if you're sideboarding in Jabba's. Like, Jabba's not necessarily in there to find you a shoot first or a waylay. It's because he has 8 health and he makes these things cheaper if they're there, and maybe he does find you one. You can't think about like putting your fire sprays on the bottom or anything. All that does is give you information. Even if you put 2 fire sprays on the bottom, you get to play the game knowing where they are and that the third one could be on its way. Waylay is not great in the mirror because if you keep bouncing their stuff, they're going to have a huge hand, and if you can't finish them off, they're going to just have a million things to play into you with their tempo plays. Okay, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about the Boba flip turn and why this is the... I mean, I guess it's obvious to say that like the turn that your leader flips is the most important turn in the game, but for a Boba deck, it's even more important because you can put your opponent on the back foot more than any other deck can. And we do this by spending 8 resources when we only have 5 resources in play. The way we do this is by making sure we can remove a unit. This deck is really good at that. Cantina Bouncer is automatic, spend 5, untap 1, right? And then when you flip Boba and attack with him, you get to untap 2 more. You can do this in the reverse order. You can do Waylay, or you can kill, like you could play a 3-drop, kill something, then drop a 5-drop. I like to make sure that I'm going to get the 5-drop first because it's usually a bigger unit that I can develop my board with. Cantina Bouncer and Bosk, not like hugely bigger than Boba Fett, but they're enablers. Bosk, if he can stay on the table, can start like really taking out your opponent's board. But that 4 attack, 5 health is what's going to let him kill something that's been on the board already, untap one of your resources, and I'll let you get the 2 more untap. So what we're doing on this turn is, previous to this turn, you want to attack the opponent's base as much as possible. But if you have free kills, like if someone just like attacks you with a 3 health unit and you've got Boba Fett out, like tap and kill it. That's fine. Especially if it's going to let you play 2 things that turn. But this is the turn where you really want to develop the board so much that at the end of this turn, you might have like 5 or 6 units out. That happened to me several times over the weekend at the 1K, even in the semifinals. Going super wide, having 5 to 6 units out after this turn because I'm just continually pushing the envelope of how many guys that I can get out against these decks that can't take care of them all. Like even these overwhelming barrages that were taking out 3 units with the barrage and then attacking for 1 more, I'm still able to get in a ton of damage because I had so many units on the board. So that's really key. Playing one of these 5-drops, taking enough, having those units on the board allow us to take enough actions like attack with things that are already there, make our opponents deal with what's already on the board so that when Boba Fett comes out, he's safe. He's not doing things like, getting shut down with a no good to me dead or even taking a steadfast hit because we're trying to put so much pressure on with this deck that they don't have the time to wait for Boba Fett to come out. And then, of course, he does come out, and he lets us push our board even further. And even more than like these plays that I love, it's the plays that Cunning sets up on the Boba flip turn. Once I started playing 2 Cunnings for like using those 8 resources to make it 2 Cunnings, that's when this deck got completely bonkers. I'll often start the 5 resource turn by tapping 2 units and then bouncing one of their units to hand. That lets me untap 1 with Boba Fett, so now I'm back at 2 resources. And because their units are tapped and removed from the board, that makes Boba Fett's deploy and attack like virtually free. You got to make sure that if you're going to do the +4 attack, you understand how the sequencing works because you're not going to get that second set of 4 resources. You're not going to be able to play that second Cunning until you've attacked with Boba Fett. So if you're doing things like double Cunning, you got to make sure you bounce with the first one or you've set up a kill that you can take, usually with Boba Fett. Because there are situations where, like, if they say they only have 2 units on the board, and you Cunning, you tap 2 of them down, and you give, like a Crafty Smuggler +4. Now you use Boba's ability to kill one of the things you tapped. You're still getting all your untaps to get to 8 resources. It's just a little bit more precarious because you want to make sure Boba attacks. If Boba doesn't get to attack and untap your other 2 resources, you're not going to go off. So everything you do on the 5 resource turn should be making sure that Boba is going to attack twice. Attack, and you get all 3 of those resources untapped. Gamorrean guards can be really great at this. You slam the Gamos, they have to attack into it. It's got 4 health, 4 attack. So, good chances are it can kill something, especially if you have other yellow units on the board that are going to get kills. That lets you... he can also protect Boba Fett really, really well, which further lets you make sure you get the attack of Boba Fett, untap back to 4 resources, and then ideally, get that +4 attack in. It's just really important that you understand the sequencing for the +4 attack, that if you're going to do it, you need to make sure you have another unit to attack with after Boba Fett. He can't be the final one to attack because that's who gets you the 4 resources back. And you don't have to play 2 Cunnings in a turn. If it's not going to work out and you still have a Cunning in hand, you have another turn to do it. If you're just going to play a couple 2-drops and that's what you want to do, you want to go wide, save the Cunning for next turn. It's not worth it to just make them discard randomly sometimes, because you can set up the tap or bounce plus the +4 again the following turn. So one of the things that you can do to really maximize your game with this deck is plan ahead. Look at your hand. Figure out what you can do each turn. I want to play a 2-drop. I want to play a 3-drop. Do I have a 4-drop, or do I have more low drops that I want to push off and go wide? What's my Boba Fett flip turn going to be? Is it going to be a 5+3? Is it going to be a 4+4? Is there a chance that I don't get the untap? Try and figure those things out and plan for the long game. And giving those units the +4/+0, it takes planning. So, get those solo games going. Practice the sequencing. Don't show up to a big event not having thought about that sequencing. Fett's Fire Spray is obviously one of our strongest cards. It's our lone 6-drop in the deck. This thing hits for 5, comes into play untapped. It is a hammer versus control. Versus aggro, I auto resource it. If I'm playing against Sabine and I have a perfect hand and one of these or even 2 of these, I'm pretty ecstatic because I know I'm just throwing these in there. I'm probably never going to play these things anyway. Even though those things become a race, they become a race with pumps, and oftentimes 2 actions to do 5 damage on the final turn of the game is just too slow. That's not every game, of course, but that's many of the games, and so I'm never sad to resource one of these in an aggro deck. If I'm playing against a control deck, I will try to hold one of these all game if my hand will allow it. But there are situations where if I had 2 Fett's Fire Sprays in my opening hand versus control, I might mulligan it. I might resource one and keep one. It would depend on the rest of the hand, but this is such a good card, and in multiples it's even better because it's difficult to deal with for control decks. So if our opponent needs to do something like vanquish it and spend all their resources or close to all of them, and we have another one in hand, we can have attacked for 5 with the first one, they kill it, we attack for 5 with the second one. Based on how much damage that we probably did on our Boba Fett flip turn, ideally, if this deck is working, that's going to be an absolute closeout play against control decks. But don't be afraid to resource this card in most other matchups because it's really good versus control, but it doesn't necessarily need to hit the table in any other fast matchup. No Good to Be Dead is another card that I wanted to talk about specifically. It's a weird one because it's such an insane tempo play, but there are matchups that just doesn't do much in. You don't care about tapping things against the aggro decks. You really want to keep pushing your board and racing. Now, sometimes it can be good. If you don't have a Cartel Spacer, you still might want to tap something and kill it with Boba Fett. But the decks where I hold this all game, Han, Chirrut, Boba Fett, those decks rely on their leader, attacking to turn on their abilities. Or for Chirrut, we can't kill him, right? We're going to spend all turn maybe killing him, and if we don't get him, it's going to have been a huge blowout. Best thing you can do is just exhaust this guy, freeze him in Carbonite, and move on with your life. Keep hitting the base. But against control decks, we don't need 3 of these. Against, a Vader deck like Blue Vader or Green Vader, it's nice to have for when Vader deploys, but why aren't they dead yet? If we're holding a bunch of these and we haven't killed them, then these probably aren't saving us anyway. So knowing when to side these out are really important. Against Han, Chirrut, Boba Fett, I'd never cut these. Against any other deck, I would really consider it to bring in the Jabbas. This is a great card. It wins a lot of games, but the thing that I'll keep talking about with sideboarding is knowing what cards are bad in a matchup. And so knowing when this card isn't doing a lot, isn't winning us the matchup, that's when they come out. It's such a good card. It's such a blowout against the decks that I listed that it's a 3 of main deck staple. It's really good. Um, Other events that you might want to cut are shoot firsts against decks that don't have big sentinels. You don't necessarily need the extra pump, even if we're bringing in Jabas. We can bring in things like Change of Heart or Confiscates instead. But really identifying which events are bad against which decks are the key to sideboarding with this deck. All right, so I was going to say more about the sideboard, but I think I really covered it. Figuring out which of these events can come out for things like Jabas or Change of Hearts or Confiscates. I try not to cut any units. I thought when I started the day that I would cut Swoop Racers for Jabas. I mean, that was my decision point on like what should be in the main, what should be in the sideboard. But I ended up just wanting to sideboard in Jabas. The one game I did sideboard out Swoop Racers was the game that I mentioned that like I didn't draw any 2 drops or 3 drops, and I played Jabba as my first thing, and he whiffed. So like after that, I didn't cut any more low drops. I only tried to cut events. And like I think one other time I cut like exactly 1 cartel spacer. But figuring out when things are bad and when things are good is really, really important. I mentioned in my tournament report that I played against Palpatine, and I was like, man, these Royal Guards are tough to kill. And then, as I'm sideboarding, like, oh, Syndicate Lackey, thing does 5. If you're worried about Steadfast Battalion, like bringing in some Syndicate Lackeys instead of the Cantina Bouncers can make sure that you take out Sabine. You won't have the explosive flip turn, but you won't get pummeled by Steadfast Battalion, and you'll have a cool 5/4 that's in play that they'll have to deal with. So I would never sideboard out a Cunning. I would never sideboard out any of my units, except for like maybe some Greedos versus like a Vader or a Palpatine. But even then, I like to sort of put all the pressure on so they don't, it's not a great turn 1 play. But after you've built a board, you start to put pressure on them. They don't have enough time or actions to spend to use the ping ability to kill your Greedo. If you do, you're just going to take initiative and hit them with something harder. So I don't mind keeping them in. Viper Probe Droids can be pretty rough versus some decks that have like 2 attack 2 drops. So they can often be a pretty good cut. But again, you don't want to, this is an aggro deck, so you don't want to cut down on any of your low drops too often. What I did want to do on this page was do some hands in real time. So I can't imagine a hand where this is a keep without any 3 drops or 4 drops and a bunch of events that we don't want to play. So I would mulligan this. And this is a fantastic hand. I would probably, unless I was playing against Chirrut Han or Boba Fett, I would probably just resource both of these No Good To Me Deads. And if I was playing against one of those decks, I would probably resource one of the No Good To Me Deads. And man, it's tough because the Gamos can be so good. But we do have the Cunning for turn 4 if we do need, or the 4 resource turn if we do need it. So against like Chirrut Han or Boba, I would probably resource Gamos and a No Good To Me Dead, holding 1 and just hoping to draw something for 4. Chances are, I guess we could do this, right? We could draw 2, and then we could draw 2. Yeah, we get Waylay Greedo. We have stuff to do. So many things are so low cost that we have things to do, and we could obviously also just Cunning. But having like Cunning and Greedo there can be pretty good, and I think we drew pretty well out of that. Is this going to draw me 6 more or reset? Okay, so we got to hit refresh. Okay, we'll do another one. Yeah, this is another one that I would mull with no 2 drop. I can't imagine a matchup where this would be a good enough hand. You don't really want to miss your 2 drops, even in control, and these are like a bunch of cards that I would want to resource. So I want, I don't like resourcing pumps, but if I have to keep my units out, there are more pumps to draw. So we're mulling, into a fantastic hand, right? We can curve out with this. We can essentially like resource the Fire Spray and one of the 2 drops. And keep the Greedo, and then know that if we do get a kill with Boba Fett, or we get an untap, which we will get an untap if we waylay, we can push this Greedo out at some point too. So I love a hand like this. Let's see what we would have drew next turn. Just magical tricks, and then we would have had Bosk for our flip turn, which is really great. Followed up with a Bodhi, take things like their Overwhelming Barrage or something, and we're pretty happy. So, yeah, I don't know. I hope that those hands. Let's do one more. Again, no 2-drop. Double cunning would be pretty hot, but let's mull for a 2-drop. Great. Yep. So we're definitely resourcing one crafty, and then probably a Bodhi there. But if it's a matchup I don't care about, no good to me dead, I would happily keep the Bodhi. Yeah. So great hands, great aggro deck. Draw more cunnings. This deck is gas. Yeah. I hope you play it. Play it smart. Think about your sequencing, how you want your first 4 turns to go. Make sure you have a great Boba flip turn, and yeah, see you at the tables.